Okay.
Just a heads up, I have these still up, painting with Craig Nissen beginning shortly, and I'll count you in at noon. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Sounds great. Thank you. I'm not even ready. Okay. Let's see where we are.
In case I need this, this is here.
Okay, if you guys are ready, I'm going to go ahead and stop my share and hand it over to you.
Okay, count me down.
Will do. One moment. So 3, 2, 1. There you go.
Hey, everyone. Welcome. Those of you guys that have tuned in. So I got a little crazy today and decided I would do a 24 by 30. So it's pretty good size. And usually it's 1824, and 1824, that's 24, and that's probably about 18. So usually they're about this size. Occasionally I go for broke, and I decided to today. I have no idea why. I picked 3 photos, and then I unfortunately picked the most difficult one that I thought I'd try today. Again, I'm not sure why. I saw potential in it. I looked at this and I thought, and we painted out here before, This is along the Sonoma coast between Bodega Bay and Jenner. This little community up in here is called Carmet. And it's near a beach called Portuguese Beach. And so it's kind of beautiful, kind of not real high cliffs, rocky, little architecture, little dabs of architecture, which I'm really going to abbreviate, indicate, and eliminate. And then some nice abstract color up in the foreground. One of the things that I notice, and I notice it about plein air painting sometimes, a lot of times when you look at things, particularly initially, and you even if you look tremendously carefully, you'll see it's, let me go, this happens if you're looking on site or if you're literally looking at a photo. The density of the darks, such as this, and this, all look very similar. And we want to create, as an artist, I want to create some depth in this painting. I do not want this, I want this to feel much further back than this. And then it's going to be pretty easy up in here because we just intensify some of the color and keep some of the contrast up. So we're going to keep this and some of this kind of similar, and we're going to push back as we move back into the distance. So with that in mind, and because with that in mind, and because it's a 24 by 30, I'm going to just start with a really simple 1.5 inch gesso brush, bigger than, sometimes you guys see me use these. That's basically a 1 inch or a 3/4 inch, they say. This is 1.5 inches. And the other brush that I'm going to be using is this Rosemary number 12. I'm going to use these two a lot. And I'll probably switch down to a number 8 when I need to. But because I have a lot of what I refer to as territory to cover, I'm going to be using as large a brush as I can, mainly because we're going quickly, okay? So with that in mind, I'm going to dip it in a little bit of turp, grab some white. I have some warm white laid out also. I'm going to get some ultramarine blue and some radiant blue. And those are the colors I'm going to start with. You know, I'm actually pretty darn close with that first stroke. So we're going to get that sky in. You see how fast I can get it in with this brush? Kind of around where that tree is. And if I load it, I mix up a pretty good amount. So I should be able to get a lot of that in. So if I kind of rub it in, so it's not real thick. We're going to rub, get as much of this covered. I'd like to cover it in about 30 seconds. I mean, people kind of laugh at me when I say that if I'm doing it for a class, because most people will spend a lot of time, which is fine. There's absolutely nothing, by the way, there's nothing wrong with spending a lot more time than I'm spending at all. I do it this way. If I'm painting a studio painting or a plein air painting, I may spend a little bit more time too, because I'm not confined pretty much to a necessary time frame. Although if you are painting on location, if you are doing a plein air piece, you have a little bit of confinement, particularly with the sun. The sun is going to change, and which is going to change the lighting on your subjects. So you do have a little bit of concern there. If you're painting in the studio, you've got forever. But I like to approach everything a little bit kind of like a plein air piece, no matter what I'm doing. And then if I want to carry it further, I slow down and refine, go through a lot of refinement stages. So usually at about 1.5 hours, I can make a thing look kind of complete, to the naked eye. Aesthetically, it isn't where I would generally want it, but that's neither here nor there. The other thing I noticed is over in this corner, there's these little piece of clouds. I kind of like that feel there. So I'm going to take some warm white, but it's too precious stuck right there. There's some little trees in front of it. So I'm going to kind of just take that warm white, push it around.
I'm going to try to get rid of that glare from there if I can.
Anna's playing with the background. Not the background of the painting, but the background behind me. So we can maybe get rid of a little bit of glare that we've got coming in. So I'm going to kind of just push a little bit back in here. Just want to have a little cloud bank, maybe another little piece of a cloud kind of. I don't want much. I don't want it to be heavily clouded. So there we go. We're going to start with the background mountain this time. I'm going to take this color. I'm going to make it very ultramarine and white because I want it to really stay in the background. So very ultramarine and white, along with whatever color I already had on the brush, something like that. I'm going to start with more color. So we're going to start about it here. the tree there. Now, just so you know, also, it's a piece of hardboard I'm working on. I've gessoed it and put a little bit of tone on it. And you can see it's very similar to my flesh tone. Maybe just my flesh tone is a little bit more red in it. So it's not dark. It's what I usually like is kind of a medium, kind of a tone. So and it's, I let some of those little accidental colors peek through. I'm not necessarily planning that. It's just happening. Okay, and I want a little bit of that mountain dark coming through right here. The back mountain, foreground mountain, a little bit darker. So all I'm going to do is add a little bit more ultramarine and maybe a tad of a warm color. In this case, I grabbed a cat orange hue, and we're just going to kind of hit right in here. You see, the paint's real dry. You see what happens when your paint's dry? Now, sometimes that can be a wonderful effect if you want that. And if you want it smooth, it's not a wonderful effect. So I smoothed it out a little bit, brought it down. But I kind of like the toothy quality. The reason being is it's easier to get it in your lay-in than it is to try and bring it in later. It's not that it's impossible. It's that it takes a little bit more delicacy and brush manipulation. So there we've got kind of some of those background mountains laid in. There are some trees, some foliage right in here. I can see it. So what I'm going to do is I've got that color on my palette adjacent to it, right next to it. I'm going to take and mix the ultramarine, and all I did is make it with the color I already had on my brush. I brought I made a little bit more ultramarine in it, and I put a little bit of yellow ochre to take it slightly to the greens. So that's about where I'm at. I don't know if you can see the difference, but there is a difference. I just don't want that to be really strong. I still want this to stay in the background. So we're going to bring some of those trees up into that cloudy area. It's kind of in here. We're going to lay it in quickly so that I've got it in there, giving myself more time at the very end to be able to go back and make it more refined, add some refinement if need be. Sometimes it's kind of cool. The lay-in does the work for you. And if you're fortunate enough when that happens, wonderful. It doesn't happen often enough for me, but I always try to do that. Try to make as much of the lay-in work as a finish. A few reasons for that. Number one, think about it. You don't have to go back and paint over everything. There's no sense in painting it and then having to repaint everything. So if I can nail down 30%, 50% of the painting correctly with the lay-in, meaning I don't have to go back and fuss and finesse with it later, I'm pretty happy about that when it happens. Little band of trees right up in there, just so I don't have to deal with it later. And we'll leave that alone. It's working out okay. I don't use this brush that often, and it's kind of fun, truthfully. Kind of enjoying it. It's bigger than I'm used to, but there's a little bit of foliage that comes over right in here. What I did, and it's a little darker. So I took that ultramarine, same color I was using, with a little bit of the ochre, and then threw a little bit of a cad orange hue into it. What that does, the warmth will bring it closer to us. Okay, now every time I paint over another color with the color that I have in the brush, keep in mind I am contaminating the color I have in the brush with that color. All right, so very often when I do that, I have to go back and kind of remix to a degree. And a little bit, boy, if I have the time at the end, I can play a lot with the layering in here because it's really, I'm seeing a lot of interesting subtleties as I look into areas. So initially I look at the photograph and eventually I look into the photograph. I hope that makes sense to you guys. Looking into it, you're looking into an area. You're not just glancing at it. You're actually looking into an area and studying it. So I don't even know if you guys can see the there's about 3 or 4 value differences that I've got in those areas right in there. But I'm going to leave that alone. I'm going to take the color, the darkest of the 3, which is this, and I'm going to come forward right in here. And I can see right now, paint was too dry. Added more turp, added more blue, added more ochre, and maybe a little bit of the cat orange. I haven't used any green. Keep that in mind. I have not used any green. The greenish characteristic is coming from the ochre and the ultramarine. And because none of the trees are brightly lit, that's why it's all very, very dark. So this is kind of dark right in here. So we're going to kind of, now I should have painted that color in, and I didn't. Shame on me. That's what happens. Sometimes I get carried away telling you guys things and forget what I should be doing. But that's okay. Hopefully we'll make it work. Oh, it dripped. A lot of people call that contemporary. If drips work, keep them. If they don't work, get rid of them. It's like any other form of your painting. If it's working, keep it and you like it, but don't keep it for the sake of keeping it. In other words, it all depends upon how it works with the overall aspect of your painting. Is it all coming together? And I know people, myself included, I used to, as a student, love happy accidents, and often I would leave them at the expense of the piece. And I've learned over the years to be a little bit more judicious in what I decide I'm going to leave. And I'm going to throw a little bit of sap green into that because it's feeling a little dead. Not much, just a little bit. And see, look at this. Now watch something, you guys. I'm going to do it in an area where if I push, look at the edge I get. All right. If I pull, I get a different kind of an edge. But you got to lift up. The key is that lift. The key in using your brush, the key is lifting at the appropriate time. So, for example, I'm going to come up here. Now you see how, if I don't lift, you see how blunt that is? All right, but watch. I'm going to push and lift, pull and lift. And using a little bit of a different facet of the brush each time. Not the same pressure, not the same part of the brush. And in doing so, you create more interest. And if you mess up, I grab one of my little ones. I didn't mess up on purpose, by the way. And I make sure I have some of this, and I just kind of push back into it. Okay? So you make a mistake, you fix it. And sometimes that going back and forth is what really gives your painting, you can call it charm, you can call it, you can call it anything you want for it, really. It just adds a lot to your painting. It adds kind of a carefree look, like it just fell off your brush, which is really something that I aim for. A photorealist, someone who's extremely realistic, doesn't necessarily aim for that. Where someone who is a little bit more impressionistic might aim a little bit more for that characteristic. So just really trying to get these edges right in my first shot. And again, if I don't, I'll go back and adjust them. But if I can, I just save myself that much more time. And if I can be effective, that's the key. Can you be effective? That's a question we all have to answer. Okay. I'm trying to get as much of this tree in correctly so I don't have to go back and fuss on it. Although I want a little bit more bounce to the top. It looks really flat here, and I like it to kind of move up a little bit more. So we'll kind of bring that up a little higher. Bring a little bit more of, there we go. And the same with this, I bring that up a little higher. Over here, try to stay kind of with the same color and keep it kind of flat. And so it's the design of the tree, the feeling of those edges, and the overall design of that shape that's more important, because there's really no modeling in it. You might, if I look into it a little later, I get a tree hole here and there, but there's really no real heavy modeling. It's really more of a shape. And that shape can be made up of 2 or 3 different variations of color. That's for sure, but it doesn't have to be. It could be flat. You don't want it to get too posterized, looking too much like it's just a graphic design. You still want that edge characteristic. So we're going to come down in here. Let's not spend too much time in that. Gave enough talk about that, but let's bring all of the foliage back in here. You can hear that. I kind of like that edge, but I'm not worried about it right now. It might, by the time I'm done, it actually might look okay. Do I like it right now? Not necessarily. Do I hate it? Not necessarily. Is it efficient? For right now, it's efficient. That's how I feel. So I'm asking and answering questions that you might be having. This part of the street comes out further. Sometimes, even though you're wrong in depicting exactly what you see, you may come up with a better design, a better feel than what's actually happening in front of you. You should always be, I shouldn't even, obviously, you should always be trying to improve. Always. There's a lot of people that say you can't improve upon nature. That's true. However, you can move things because that might help. You can move things design-wise. You can bring an edge out. Sometimes tangencies occur and it doesn't work. So, there's a truth in the fact that you can't improve upon nature, but you can improve upon the design sometimes. Maybe not all the characteristics that occur in nature, but sometimes the design. And that's what we're doing as artists. We're trying to constantly take something and add something that we see that could make the image that we're looking at feel better. So we're going to move our way down. I get a lot of questions about, do you always paint from top to bottom? My answer is basically yes. It's not, I don't think of it as top to bottom. No, people look at it that way. I think of it as background to foreground. Foreground is almost always going to be in the bottom, unless you have a tree branch coming in from the top. But generally speaking, the sky is going to be at the top, and the thing closest to you is probably going to be at the bottom or overlapping something. So, okay.
Can you explain where the location is again?
Yeah, the location. Asked about this location. Location is an area called Portuguese Beach, looking back at the coast. So the beach, the ocean is here. We're at my back, pretty much. I'm looking back at these wonderful cliffs with a little ice plaint falling over the edges, a lot of craggy rocks. And I'm looking over a bluff that has a lot of ice plant on it. Back at this kind of little tiny community of Carmet, little architectural area back in there. And to kind of help someone in case they're wondering, this location is about halfway between Jenner, for those of you that might know Jenner, and Bodega Bay, where the birds were filmed. So that gives you, hopefully that helps. That was an outing we took a while ago. Now, what I'm going to do from this point forward is I'm going to start in on the darks, because the darks are your drawing. By drawing, I mean it helps you design. So if I squint my eyes at this, I see dark, basically mass, little spattering of lights, dark mass, thin dark mass, dark mass, a few little spotty darks up in the foreground. That's how I see it. The difference is I wanted to make this back further, so I took this dark mass, made it lighter. So kept this dark. It's still not as dark as I can go, nowhere near. And so I'm going to go a little darker here. And that's exactly the same color. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to add a little bit of the asphaltum in there, along with the blue. And I don't want to go as dark as I can, so I want to bring a little white to it. Little white to that mixture that I just did. And what the white will do is lighten it a little bit. So it's blue. There we go. So we're going to start with that. it's a little warmer than I want. Boom. What do? I throw some more blue into it. A little bit more blue, a little bit more white. There we go. And as you're painting, you'll feel, and you just begin to feel, is it too dark? Is it too light? Is it too warm? Is it too cool? You do those adjustments. Now, this is how I work. There's a lot of artists that will sit there and analyze the color and try and mix the perfect color. I'm not that good. I basically adjust the color. I'm not good at, you guys probably have heard when I paint, I surprise myself when I hit that color as close as I think I really want that down here to be right. You know, if I get the color right on top of it, great. But really, to me, it's the value that I'm after, and I want to come close to that color as close as I possibly can. Now, this is about a similar height, but I have it down too low. So I'm going to bring it up here. And I just feel a little bit more blue in that. I don't know why. As I look at it, so I threw a little bit more blue into the color and a little white. So there's a little blue, a little white thrown in. Boom, we get this mass. It goes off the page. Now, the format's a little changed too. By that, I mean, this format's a little longer than this, which is perfectly all right. I always move things around to make it fit within the format that I'm working. Okay, so we got this big one. That's this. Now we're going to hit this mass, which is about right under that tree. But I brought this over too far. So I brought that's okay. Let's just move things around. That is way too warm. But I'll blue it up a little bit later or right now.
Blew it up.
Yeah, blew it up. Make it more blue.
There we go.
The faster I paint, the more inventive terminology I come up with. Okay, so we kind of have this worked out. Let's just put some other tones in here just so I've got a little tone up here, make it come up. Okay, I've got the design working relatively well. Little spot right in here. This comes out, goes up. Right about in here, we have a little spot of darks. We got a few little darks up in here, kind of in the corner. And for right now, I'm just going to use the color I have. These are, you know, kind of what I'm thinking. Some areas there. Comes up, over, down here, all the way down the corner. Let's throw some other colors into it. I threw some alizarin. Look at this color. There we go. Why did I throw alizarin into it? Because it's the darkest, warmest color we have, so it'll come forward. Alizarin and basically the straight. It's also kind of nice to get a little color mixture going on. Okay. So there we have kind of an abstracted version of the light and dark pattern. Now let's start adding some of the lights. First thing we'll do is add a little light to the mountain back there. So where are we at? Going to take some raw sienna. Let me give you the palette, by the way. I haven't talked to you about the palette.
Before you do that, can I interrupt you and just ask what color did you use to tone the board?
Yeah, I always use a warm and a cool and gesso. So it's gesso and a warm and a cool. This warm and cool was probably an umber and maybe a little ultramarine, and I might have thrown a little ochre into it. But sometimes I'll use a cad red light, an ultramarine, a little bit of yellow. So, you know, I want it to be neutral. That's my preference. I do know artists that love to work on hot canvases. I have a good friend of mine who's a wonderful artist that loves to work on yellow. I like to work on all different colors. I personally try not to get into what I call a rut and paint only on one. The only thing I do say is I generally like things that are similar in value to what you might consider a light flesh tone.
Okay, now you can do the palette.
Okay, let me give you the palette that I'm working with. I have a little warm white, radiant white, yellow Hansa, Naples yellow, yellow ochre, cad orange hue, alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, radiant blue. Now, I don't know why, I'm probably not going to use this. I threw a turquoise phthalo out there, and I probably am not going to use it. Sap green, I have raw sienna and asphaltum. And that's my palette.
What was the last one?
Welcome to my palette. I like my palette out always, and I know I've mentioned this before, for whatever I'm painting. And I look at, if I'm on location, I look at what I'm painting. I generally have like a workhorse that I work off of that I almost always have on my palette. I always have
Did you say
yellow
raw
ochre.
sienna?
What was that?
Did you say raw sienna? No,
Raw sienna. Yes, I did.
you did.
Raw sienna is kind of a warm, dark yellow ochre. And I don't always lay it out. I just happen to buy a new tube of it. So you can, here's my reasoning. I was running out. So I bought a new tube. I usually have 2 or 3 tubes of color. So we're going to come up with this little white area right in here. And all I did is with that color, I just threw some Naples yellow into that color. And that's how I came up with a lighter version of it. Right about there. And over on the other hillside, down here, a little darker and warmer. I threw a little bit more cad orange into it. I don't know if this is going to work, but let's try it. I like it. Oh, I actually do like it. Son of a gun. I wasn't kidding. Right there. Soften that edge so it isn't too harsh. Okay, it's all kind of making sense to me. And in the beginning, that's all I can hope for is the kind of little bit of a tree hole right there. Okay, leave it alone. Keep moving. Talking to myself. I'm going to save the little dabs of architecture for the end if I can. So right now I'm going to lay in kind of all this stuff kind of on the other side of the road. There's some green areas back in there. So I grabbed some sap green, threw it into the color that I was just using. Mixed it right into that color. And we're going to come in right along the house right there. A little bit in here. Back in here. Don't see any there. Now, as we go down, we're going to go kind of to the, I'm not going to paint the top yet. I'm going to paint kind of the top areas of the cliffs. So obviously lighter. First thing I did is I grabbed some Naples yellow light. Next thing I'm going to do is add a little warm. So I added some, and I'm mixing this into that greenish color I was just using. So I grab some ochre. I'm going to test this. I think this is going to be too dark and maybe not even warm enough. I'm right. I mean, it's not too dark. It's just not warm enough. A little bit more. I'm going to throw a little alizarin into it. I threw a little cad orange. I'm going to throw a little bit more alizarin, and I'm going to darken it with a little green. So I've used complements, so to speak, green and red. And I went way too dark with it, but I'm mixing it kind of into the color, that base color I had there. That feels pretty good. That's all I can hope for in the beginning. You just shoot for pretty good. Goes up here, above this. I'm keeping it warm because I want that to be an underpinning. You notice I didn't lay out, just because I couldn't find it when I was laying my palette out, but I didn't lay out I throw a little more alizarin so you can see a little bit more red happening. I didn't lay out a burnt sienna, which I usually do. But I have enough other reds in here that it's going to work just fine without it. Some greens in there. So we just kind of want to get some color moving in these areas. It's going to be what we call variegated colors. A lot of different colors moving around. A broken color, if you will, is another way of thinking of it. Okay. Pretty good. Now I'm going to go with a darker version of that just by taking the same color and mixing a little bit of asphaltum and a little ultramarine into it. And it went too dark, so I'm going to add a little white to it. So it's a more neutral version. It's not quite as colorful. And it's hopefully a little darker. Let's see. Too dark. Bring a little ultramarine, a little light blue into it. Yeah, let's start with that. It's going to go a lot lighter, but this is a good underpainting. I'm going to go add some white now. Why? Because I see it get lighter here. Some grayer areas up here. And that falls back to the color I was just using with the ultramarine and asphaltum. Kind of in this area. A little bit in here. Down at the bottom. Just so I need some color underneath. So sometimes what you're doing, and this is a line I use a lot when I teach, actually, in any classes I teach, is something that I want everyone to kind of remember when you're painting. Everything you're doing is setting up for the stage that follows. So until you're done, right? Until you think you're done at your final stage, that's one thing. But every stage of your painting is a setup for what's to come on top of it, so to speak. I'm just using the on top of it as a rough commentary on kind of an approach, because you're going to go over things over and over. Some of the stuff you do initially, as I stated right off the bat, some of the stuff you do initially is going to stay, but much of it is going to change. And that's where the evaluation process will always come in. It'll always come in as you're working. Am I doing it right? You're asking yourself questions. Is this the right color? Is this the right value? When you're painting quickly, the best thing you can do is something I'm not doing right now because let's stand back. The more you stand back, the better you'll see how your overall painting is working. The more you're on top of it, the more you see things from this distance, which is where I'm about 18 inches, my eyes are about 18 inches away. But that is now, people only view things at 18 inches when they want to get up close to it. That isn't how they see the painting. They see the painting from a distance. And so you've got to look at it from a distance, because that's the way you'll know whether it's working. A lot of white, blue, and there, look at that, nice color. I'm going to make it a little bit more bluer. Throw a little bit of the radiant blue into this color. Just, I feel more blue, that's why. A little of it sneaks out, which it just did. I like that. The fact that I didn't mix it thoroughly and it just kind of snuck its way through.
So Lynn would like to know if you would say your tone board is a 5 on a 1 to 10 scale.
No, my tone board is about a 3. 5 is pretty dark. I don't want white, but I don't like it too dark. If you're going to paint a night scene, great. You can work on a darker surface because that gets you to your night characteristic quicker. But, I'm just used to painting on, and again, I mentioned this, every artist has colors they like, all right? And they're go-to colors. I don't have necessarily a go-to color. I guess if someone asked me what my go-to color was, what color I use probably more than any other color, I would probably say yellow ochre. I tend to use that in almost any painting, whether I'm doing a portrait, whether I'm doing a landscape, and that's why I kind of use that as kind of an overall, what you might consider a go-to color. I mix it in a lot of my colors. But, everybody comes up with a formula that works for them. I hate to think of painting as very formulaic. I don't necessarily think it is, but at the same time, there is a degree of formula or familiarity, if you want to look at it that way. You get very familiar with various color schemes and with various types of marks, and you get comfortable, and that's how you build your repertoire of what someone might call your skill set. You built, that is built. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna give you a little Chuck Pile humor, and
Uh-oh.
he wants to know what do I do if I'm tone deaf?
If you're tone deaf,
Tone, get it?
I can't come back at that really
I
fast because
know.
I'm thinking of too many things. Damn you, Chuck. If you're tone deaf, what do you do? Well,
Go with a neutral tone. That's the best.
yeah. Think value. What if you have no values? I know that was your next one. I beat you, okay? Then you're just in deep trouble. I almost said a bad word. It's fun. This, I gotta watch out because I'm getting hung up in areas. I can feel it.
Stop it.
Yeah, let's move along a little faster, okay? Notice how I ask you and then I answer? It's because I don't hear you guys answering me. I'm just assuming. So we're gonna kind of get some of these tones in. Look at almost the same color as the board. Son of a gun. Oh, that wasn't a plan. A little darker up in here. I got a feeling I'm going to be using a lot of the board that's underneath to help solve some of the problems. I want to give myself enough time when I get in here. So about in the next 20 minutes, I want to get all this stuff pretty much laid in. That's my goal. Will I reach it? I absolutely have no idea, but I'm going to shoot for it. That's my plan. And I teach this class at the academy called Quick Studies, and that's kind of what I tell everybody in that class. Just shoot for that time frame. And if it doesn't come off quite the way you want it, I'll bet enough of it has come off that way where you can kind of go back into it and fix it up. Now, am I right about that or am I wrong? I'm right. Okay. Too many people are very apprehensive and they paint with an apprehensive attitude. In other words, you're not sure that you're doing the right thing. That shows. That shows with that spot of green right here. I'm going to move it over. And if it shows, that's when a painting can begin to appear labored, or as a lot of people like to refer to, overworked. It's because of the apprehension. So I'm going to use my line that I use every week. You can say it with me. Paint like you know what you're doing, but assume you're probably wrong. That's my approach to painting in a nutshell. I tackle it with kind of reckless abandon and then adjust because where I'm wrong. There's a little green. Now I'm going to lighten that green a little bit, and we're going to put a little bit of it, sneak a little bit of it back here, and maybe in here. Bring that green over here. A little bit of it back up in here, and some other darks into that green. I'm getting kind of anxious on Monday this week. I get my first shot, my first vaccine. Was going to be later, and I found a new opening and grabbed it, and so.
Thanks to Bill Gittens for letting us know.
Yeah, thanks to Bill Gittens. Chuck Pyle gave me the first one, and I've held on to that because I want to make sure I get the shot. And then I just received notice that our medical provider, which happens to be Sutter, is doing vaccinations, and so I get mine because I'm old. That's one of the very few advantages, by the way, of being old. That and getting into theaters at a discount. Although we're not doing much of that right now, so it really isn't working. Okay, let's keep moving along here. it's kind of shaping up. There's a little busyness happening right in here. I want to get kind of this area in. I haven't hit the lights. I always hold back on lights. You guys may or may not realize that. If you've ever watched me do any of these things, you'll notice that I usually hold off on my lights. I generally paint more of my darks first. I won't say I always do that. I'm saying I generally do that. Every time I say something like that, I'll always find an instant where I don't do it that way. And then I kind of feel like, well, I just said something that, it's like being a politician, saying something and having people correct you later. So I won't do that. Let's just try and make a decent painting. Okay.
How do you approach the figurehead studies with abandon when drawing is so important? That's what Laurel would like to know.
The figurehead studies, same way. You know what? If you really want to teach yourself, when I first came to the academy, I taught a class, and it was a summer class, so it was a shortened session, and it was a head painting class. And I decided I was going to teach what I call head building, and not the traditional head painting. So I basically didn't allow anyone to draw the head first. You basically just started in with shapes, and it worked. It worked. People, I mean, I got a lot of pushback, about that, but it actually worked pretty well. Where people, so you paint a big shape in. And I'll tell you what, if you're apprehensive about doing that and you want to try something sometime, paint an apple without drawing it. Just paint a big swatch of color, then try and take and put a tone to it. Don't even try and paint that outside of that apple that neat. All right, put a big swatch and then try and put a shadow onto it, and then kind of build from there. It's the same concept. You're building. You're as opposed to drawing and filling in. And you can do heads. You can do anything that way. Hope that made sense. It does to me. And it truly works. There are certain things that you paint because you want to do a finished painting. All right. You want to do a finished painting maybe for a commission, for a gallery. And then there's other things that you do for the sake of practice and testing yourselves. Can I do this? I do that with these, by the way, you guys. I test myself. Sometimes I bite off more than I can chew, so to speak. And maybe I have today, but that isn't the point. The point is you want to push yourself. So everything doesn't have to be a finished painting. A lot of it should be a learning experience. And that's true with classes, by the way. That's true with whether you're taking a plein air workshop, any of this. You're basically kind of testing yourself. And hopefully you're gaining something out of it. If you get great paintings out, I know there's people that take workshops. I remember a workshop I taught a few years ago, and I had an artist in there who was actually a pretty good painter. And my God, he wanted to get great paintings, gallery paintings out of the workshop. And they were relatively, I do half-day poses, but it was a figurative workshop. Do half-day poses. And I kept trying to explain to him that he shouldn't be attempting, gallery finish type figurative work from the experience. The experience is to learn, but he wanted to get gallery paintings that he could sell. And I went, oh my God, then I don't know that a workshop's the best place, but workshops, they're work. And I'm not saying you're not going to get a finished painting, by the way. You might. You should always be striving, pushing yourself for something that would be what you could think is finished quality. But that finished quality, my finished quality is, for me, has several implications. Number one, sometimes my finished quality is really refined. And at other times, my finished quality is very, very abrupt and painterly. So, it depends upon what you're striving for. You can't strive. I can't take and do a 20-hour painting in an hour and a half. Neither can you. We're all victims of dealing with what we can do in a given amount of time. Now, with what I do now in these little things, I couldn't have done this 30 years ago, probably. I don't think I could. Never tried it. But over the years, you get more confident. You gain a better feeling for your medium, a better feeling all the way around. All right, I got to get some other areas in. I can see right now. I'm not going to get it done if I don't. So I'm going to thin my paint out and start to mass in some big, get some nice color happening in there. Some nice little dark spots right below that green. And so I'm just using the brown, the blue, kind of a color I have mixed up, kind of a nothing color. Okay. I got to step back for a second. I need a lot more lights up in there, but we'll get to that. Now let's add some color. What am I adding? Alizarin crimson, little tad orange hue, and let's see what color that is. Oh, that's not bad. A little bit more red, maybe. And we want it right in here, right, almost the center of the painting, almost right about here. Shock the heck out of you, huh? It's not going to stay just that color. It's going to have some other colors move into that color. I'm going to add a little bit blue into it, just to kind of gray it down just a little bit. I'm going to bring it over in here, up here, down there, and this is going to be real abstract. That's my feeling. I like that. I can do that on bigger paintings. I have a harder time doing it on smaller paintings. So asphaltum, blue, turp, and whatever other color I got in the brush. All right, feels a little warm, but darkened it with a little bit more blue. And what I'm going to do is this right in here.
Turp meaning Gamsol.
Turp is Gamsol. When I use the word turp, I'm a
Just
habit from painting before there was Gamsol. Why do I use Gamsol? It's the least toxic of all the solvents. So that's why I use Gamsol. How do I know that? Chemist told me. Okay. I like the feeling of that. I like the energy that's happening there, but I need kind of this neutral tone. So I'm going to take the same color I have, I'm going to add white to it. And turp. And probably a little bit more asphaltum, which I think I'm going to need more of. I think I have it right here. And I'm going to that's a little cooler. I had a little too warm. A lot of turp in this. A lot of, Gamsol in this. And then let's kind of maybe a little darker, a little more blue, a little more, let's push some color variation into that so it's not too dead and flat. Right, I also see it right in this region. It comes across here. I see the same kind of color right about in here. A little bit over here too, over to the left, but a little lighter. That's pretty good. I think I can add a little bit. I threw some white into that color just because I wanted some variation into it. So let's go for the green, the red, and we'll put the yellow in right at the end, maybe with a palette knife. But right now we're going to go for the green and the red. I'll put the green in first, yellow. The other thing that I keep mixing color into color, everybody. I'm not constantly mixing up an entire pot. So there's kind of oh, that's pretty good. Kind of like that. Throw a little bit more sap into it. And we'll start with a little greener color. down here. You see that that energy with the brush stroke will give me, I'm not trying to overpick anything. I'm laying color fields in. If you kind of think in those terms, sometimes you'll be happier. It depends upon the kind of painting you like. If you like very loose painting, you could be a lot happier just by doing stuff like this and leaving it alone. You can get real thick with this too.
Laurel has a good question here. Sometimes she says, when I work from a photo reference, I fall into copying it versus more true decisions from plein air experiences. What do you recommend?
Bigger brushes. You can't be as perfectly accurate if you stay with a brush that feels out of where you're almost out of control with. If you work with a smaller brush that you can be perfectly in control with, you're going to be more apt to depict the exactness of the image that you're kind of working from. So I really find by scaling those brushes up, you can really do a lot. And be bold, give yourself time frame like you would if you were painting plein air. It's a trap that a lot of people fall into when they paint from photos. Particularly if you're kind of realistically minded, if you're a realist. It's not unusual for someone to, I added, by the way, just some, whatever color I had on the brush, I added a little orange and a little red. Let me go back to what I was saying. If you're a realist, as I am, I was more of a realist when I was younger. Now I'm a little bit more of, I guess, what one might call an impressionist. Maybe even sometimes I even like to lean a little bit expressionistic at times where my stuff really gets crazy. Part of it is it keeps me from getting bored. And the other thing that I would recommend with that regard, don't think of what you're doing as a finished painting. Think of it as maybe a study. That'll help you immensely. If you think of everything more as a study, as you're approaching things that way. Now, paint it as a study. Now, then you can go back and build on it. If you really want to go further with it, you can go back and build on it at any time. That's up to you. I'm just painting these reds in kind of the way I see them. And I don't know if the color is exactly right. It's close. Change that brush to, I'll give you another little hint. Change that brush around. So sometimes pull it, sometimes push hard, sometimes just tickle it with the tip of that brush. Use varying degrees of wetness to your paint. So you don't always stay, really the same consistency. Certain consistencies will give you certain effects. So I just stood back for the first time. It's got a similar look to that, which is kind of what I'm after. So I'm going to leave a lot of the bottom alone right now. There's a lot more that can be done. If I do have the time, I will go back and do it. If I don't have the time, it's going to almost stay that way. And it may actually look pretty good. If I look at it today now, I may not want to do too much to it. I just noticed a dark above that red. Little darks, little nice marks. You're going for these interesting marks always. At least I am. To me, the most important part of painting to me is the brushwork, so that it's not contrived. It's not the same. It has energy. I hate for, I'm going to go back to my buddy John Asaro and say, when he said to me once, a painting is either exciting or it isn't. He kept it that simple. And I know exactly what he means. I agree completely. So we're going to start to put some lights in. We got to, because I'm at that stage of the painting. So I got to put some lights in because I got to leave myself about 10 minutes to get a little bit of architecture indicated in
taking warm white, little Naples yellow, some white, mixing it into whatever color I have in the brush, which is too much red. So I'm throwing a little bit of blue back into it and a little bit more of the warm white. I don't want to go all the way to the lights because I'm going to use a palette knife at the end for that. But we're going to start right in here. Okay, right here. And I'm not going to go for all that texture. We're going to go for the basic planes that we're seeing. But if I use the brush gingerly, I can actually give some of those textural variations. Keep other brush handy. There we go. Leave it alone. Now I find myself saying that even when I'm just painting all by myself. Leave it alone. Scold myself. Artists are a little crazy, you know that? So we're painting kind of the feeling of all of these areas. This area right here, I got two little brushes here. In fact, I'm going to grab my big filbert, just for the hell of it. Egbert, excuse me, not filbert. And I'm going to keep it kind of a little bit more color in it because I want to add a little color here and there. And then take this brush and push back in. See, you're working back and forth as much as you can. I see some really interesting tones happening up at the top there. I just looked up at it. I'm going to grab it and put some more. Well, my ochre's got a lot of red in it because I'm going to come in with these lights. There, the top, a little bit in here, more back in here. Top surface. Now, I see it almost a little greener. So I added a little white, a little blue, and a little yellow. So that's not, I don't like to use the same color everywhere. That works better. And we'll go back to the dirtier color. Get it to come in here and work its way kind of down on some of these cliffs. Down here, we're just I'm letting it mix into the colors that are there. So a lot of people would be really apprehensive at this point because they would say, oh, it's muddy color. Muddy color is more of what you would call an unwanted color. Muddy color, some people call them grays. So a gray is a muddy color, but it is put in an area where it actually works. So muddy is really more of a result of a color not being appropriate. And it's interesting. Where did I get that from? Well, I remember years and years ago, I went to a portrait convention, and I don't even know who it was. It might have been John Howard Sand. And one of these gentlemen up on stage, they asked a question. What is a muddy color? Which I thought was a brilliant question, really. I just thought that, how nice that someone would actually ask a question like that. What is a muddy color? And basically they said it's an unwanted color. But an unwanted color could also be too intense, which necessarily isn't always muddy. So I would say it would be an unwanted gray color. Or drab color.
So
okay, look at that bright. I threw a lot of white, a lot of blue back into a color I already had mixed. Kind of this color up here. But we got to get some lights. Got to get some pops going on. Go ahead.
Laurel has a question. When you set out to do a more finished piece, do you still keep your present approach, then carry it further?
Yep, exactly. I try and keep energy into the darn painting because I have a tendency to want to paint cleaner and tighter. And even if I'm doing what we would call, say, a finished commission portrait, I'm more accurate with what I lay down, but I really lay it down, with a freedom, so it doesn't feel heavily rendered. But the one thing I do is I leave my strongest darks and my strongest lights for the completion of the painting. I don't start with those. If there are going to be one area of the area that might be a little bit more pronounced than the other, it would be on the darks, not on the lights. Hope that answers that question. You guys, I love these questions, by the way, because I think they're really intelligent questions. I think you guys are asking, and sometimes I like it because it makes me think about things that I haven't thought about before, which is always great when you have to kind of address something. It's wonderful for me because it makes me more aware of what I'm doing, and it also makes me better in the future in any sort of teaching or workshops that I do, because I've actually been forced to think about these things and not just rely. I mean, there's a lot of intuition as you paint. Intuition is literally, you're not born with it. Intuition is something you've built through the years through practice. So when I get questions, when you guys ask questions, I personally really appreciate it, because number one, I know you're watching and you're really paying attention, and you probably you're doing it because you want to get better, which is the reason anybody should. I mean, some people like to watch these for entertainment purposes, which I think is great. Hey, if I'm entertaining, which it's not necessarily my goal, great. I'm very happy that you guys get that out of it. But truthfully, my main concern is those of you that want to be better painters, or even just start. There's a lot of people just want to get going, and they, just get started. Don't be afraid. The worst thing you could do is be afraid, be timid. That's true with almost anything, though. Unless it's something dangerous. I mean, if you're timid when you first start skiing, in a way that's good, because you don't want to tackle something you can't do. So, there are times that timid is good. Painting isn't one of them. Okay, I'm looking at my time frame, figuring out what I can do, what I can accomplish, the amount of time I have left. I'm going to come forward again. Going to take some yellow Hansa, a lot of it in my brush, mix it into a little bit of the radiant blue that I have off to the side, add a lot of medium. I'm going to add safflower oil. I want to see what color that is. Yep, that's about it. But I don't have enough of it. So more safflower oil. Okay. I don't like that. I'm going to grab a palette knife, see if I can get better characteristics out of a knife.
So Bruce wants to know, as the painting progresses, are you thinning less?
Am I what?
Are you thinning the paint less?
Yeah. No. In essence, I'm thickening it more, if that's kind of what you're asking. Yes, I'm getting a little bit more dense with the paint.
You're not adding as much Gamsol.
No. Unless usually if I'm adding anything, it's I'm sorry, thinking. If I add anything, it's more of linseed oil, or in this case, safflower oil. I like some of it that I'm getting in there, and I don't like some of it. But right now, beggars can't be choosers. I got to literally get enough of it in there so that it begins to work. The values and colors are right, so I'm not worried about that. I'm more worried about some degree of refinement. Okay. So we're getting a lot of color variation, which is what I want up here, but I need, this is the area, if you would say, what's your focal point? This is the area I'm calling my focal point. So it's the area I really want to carry the furthest. So I am going to take a littler brush, and we're going to hit some of the darks. I think I need to hit more lights in there. Right about there.
Laura wants to know if you ever do glazing with safflower oil.
Yeah, I don't glaze too often, but yes, if that's what you're going to use, if you're going to glaze at all, sometimes I have painted pictures. I usually glaze when things aren't working. I'm more of an alla prima painter. There are people that paint and glazing is their technique. I glaze because something didn't work. And I have actually glazed for another reason too, because I want to show off textures more. Maybe I have some really beautiful thick rocks that I've painted, and I want those things to really stand out. So what I may do is glaze back on top because it'll sink into the divots. And so, why you glaze is up to you. I mean, I don't teach glazing. I have taught it. I have taught people how to do for example, a grisaille or grisaille which is basically a monochromatic underpainting. And you can do it in browns, you can do it black and white. People do it all different ways. And you let that dry, and then you start to glaze your colors in on top, finishing with a few strategic, really well-placed opaques that pronounce things more. But that's a style or an approach to painting, and it can be fantastic if for that kind of an approach. If that's really what you love, it really comes down to the kind of painting you want to produce. That goes back to that magic word that I've used over and over and over again, is called intent. What is your intent? Most people approach a painting and they don't have an intent. They literally just want it to look good, which is not a bad intent. But when you say look good like what? Look good like Monet? Look good like Edgar Payne? Because those are two different approaches to painting. So, look good like wonderful painter out there, Canadian painter David Sharp, whose work I happen to really be fond of. Ken Knight, whose work I happen to be fond of. They're definitely not in the same ballpark as some other artists that might want to work a lot more real. Daniel Sprick, super beautiful, phenomenal realist. So that intent is important. When someone like Daniel Sprick or even Ken Knight start painting, they have an approach. They have a definite intent that they're after with their paintings. It shows. It comes through. And it's something I think everybody needs to do, is have that specific intent. What are you trying to achieve technically? Not just in terms of what you're painting, but the way you're painting. How do you feel about that? That's just pure what am I saying? It's just pure Naples yellow, by the way. But dry brush on. I'm not adding any medium. So it's sticking and it's not sticking. By doing that, it'll hit and miss, and which will give you a little bit more of that textural information that you might be after, which I'm after. Let's put it that way. And really light down here. Look at that. Really big, powerful light areas. And then a little bit of a green. So I'm going to mix a little of the blue into it. We'll bring some of that green down into it. As I said, a lot of that's going to stay kind of abstracted. Now, as I stand back, that abstracted area to me is working pretty good. I'm not displeased with it. Let's start it that way.
I think if anything needs work, it's right here. And then I'd like to take, in about 5 minutes, started on some of that architectural stuff. So, few little dark accents in on it. So it's not just a flat. There's some shrubbery up in here. These are starting to work. There's a lot of little things I can add in here. I want to get enough. I think what I want to do now is maybe hit the top of that road just a little bit stronger. I'm going to pick up some Naples yellow because I'm just about out. There we go. And I'm going to, with my little brush, Naples yellow, medium, and by medium I mean safflower oil. And I'm throwing a little bit of white into that color too. I want to get want this edge to be nice and light and then fade. It's brighter over here. We get a road right. And the reason I've added, by the way, the reason I've added the safflower oil is I can paint on top without it, just with a light touch. See that? And I'm not contaminating it into all that other paint. And that has to do with two things: the touch on the brush and the degree of wetness of the paint that I'm applying. If that paint is too wet, what happens is if it's not wet enough, what happens is it pushes itself into all the other paint. So you want it to be wet enough. And I can do the same. Well, I've got that color. I can bring a little bit of that color to the top of this, down in here, and in here I see a little. Just kind of push it around. If I put a stroke down, I don't like it, I'll just mess that stroke up. Okay. I have a little bit of little raw sienna into it to bring a little more color into that. All right, let's start. I like that little spot of color there. You know that? Huh, interesting. It kind of isn't there in reality. It's one of those happy accidents. Going back to that kind of thing. But it works. Little spot of color. I wouldn't mind adding in a little bit more here and there if I can find a way to do it. Right now, let's get some of the architecture in so I can go back and fuss in this just a little bit more because I'd like to. I don't want to get too heavy into that architecture. I'm going to use a big flat brush. Actually, I think I'm going to use a number 12, my flat number 12 rosemary, because it's a little bit more, architecture is a little more precise. So start with ultramarine and white, and that's going to be kind of a shadow color. Maybe a little more ultramarine. And I have a little kind of neutral warm mixed into that. We're going to paint kind of the side of that building and the top of that. And while I've got this color mixed up, I'm going to look in here and I see a little bit of, I'm going to make what I call architectural strokes. And what I mean by that, strokes that are very geometric. They have a sharp, crisp edge. And so a big flat brush like this is great because I've got a crisp edge and a crisp edge and a flat edge. So I can actually do strokes that way, and make it feel like architecture. Behind that house, it's a little bit up in here. It's a window right in there. The side of the house here. Another side of a house here. Let's kind of keep moving along. So just some dark shapes right in here, which we'll add some breakup to. A little bit of a roof line back in here. Some darks in there.
maybe and add a little bit more light to it. Okay, bring out some of the little light areas that are sit back behind. Not going to get into a lot of color variation in there because I just, mainly because of time, truthfully. We're going to put the side of that house in. It's a little too dark. It's warmer. That's why it's a different color. But the same kind of stroking, by the way. Same kind of stroke. There's some dark foliage back there. So I just added a little bit of green to that darker color, and we'll just kind of pop some darks back here. If I can always let foliage cover things too, which is really a nice little touch. Go back to that kind of, any more over in here, a little bit back in here. Some little light areas. I'm not going to dwell on this stuff, you guys, just so you know. I'm just going to indicate it. There's a beautiful little house right there. And that really should be lighter. That's the light side. Shadow side. And then we're going to paint some of those light. I'm going to take literally the warm white with just a touch of Naples into it. Give me a lot of, and we're going to paint some light sides now. We're going to paint the light side of this. Oops. Really messed that up, huh? Okay, let's do it this way. I shouldn't have put that window in before. There we go. I should know better. You add detail like windows later on when it works. Warm it up. So we're starting to give a feeling of architecture, which is actually working okay. A little bit of light back on that hill. Bring a little bit more light up here. A little bit more up here. Too much, way too much. Okay. There's now a little roof line back here. Put them in, you put foliage back over if you have to. A little roof line right here. And a little blue with that color, and we'll put it a little side of the house. And top of the roof, let's go back to my dark colors. The dark color, remember, is just ultramarine, a little white, and ochre. So it's an easy color to come to. So if you ever mess up, you just go back to those colors. Let's see what else is a little dark right here. The tree overlapping down here. Tree up here. Let's see what we got going on in here. Over here, got a little bit right below the roof line. A little bit below this roof line. So we're starting to get the feeling of art, just the feeling. That's all I'm painting. So it's just the painting about architecture. So there's little lights on the houses back here. So there's a little light right there, chimney sticking up, a little light on a house right over here, a little piece of light right in there. And we start to give a feeling. There's a busyness. Activity, as I've often said. I use that word a lot. I'm painting activity more than I'm painting. I say that when I do folds, painting activity. Now, again, if I want to get refined, and I have the time, and I want to go back into this, a lot of times I'll use a judgment call later on. Does it need more? If it does, I'll go back into it and do a little bit. But when I'm painting a quicker painting such as this, I try and keep the integrity of the concept of a quick painting and not destroy it by turning it into a more what I would call, for me, a studio painting. Studio painting is something I approach a little bit differently. So you start to get a feeling of all that activity. Now I can go back in. I've got a small sketch brush that I use. Go back in with that original blue gray color. Now we'll put that window back in. It's a little darker than I wanted. And a little bit of this roof. I'm going to go here and back a little dark back in here. So you're given a feeling of some of the detail without painting detail.
So here's a great question from Brandon. If you're painting from photograph, do you have a preference in the photo quality? Would you recommend painting from lower quality for more
Yeah.
improvisation?
Yep. Great question. Great question. Wonderful. Absolutely. If you paint from a photograph, I mean, sometimes I was going to do a painting. I think I will one of these weeks. I have it kind of set aside from Paris. It's a very busy painting, by the way. It's completely out of focus. And I thought, you know, I had to do one of these working from I have a couple night scenes that are out of focus too. And I'll tell you what, boy, you can, because you do a lot more interpretation then. You don't feel compelled to paint exactness. And exactness is what kind of slows you down and can contribute to the character of what a lot of people refer to as overwork. A lot of it has to do with people trying to be too exact. So let's put some little activity. Dark windows. Where do I see dark window? I see a dark window there. I see a dark window there. A little bit there. Then I see some light windows in the building below. So let's just put them in. One there, there, a long window there, and then a darker roof line. So we've got the feeling of activity. Now, as soon as I break some trees over that, it'll even make it more convincing. So I got about 10 minutes. Let's see what we can do with this 10 minutes. I may go a little over because I bit off a little bit more than probably I could chew. The effect is okay. I got to stand back and see how I feel about it. I don't feel I'm light enough right here. And I see a piece of light right there, really nice piece of light I can use. Let's see, let me take this little brush and nice piece of light right here. I like that little smack of light right in there. And a little bit more behind. Little pieces hitting rough lines. A little light up in here. Then there's, I just noticed some foliage right here. Probably a little lighter than I wanted to be, but it's okay. It doesn't bother me. I already hit this area over here a little bit. A little bit of a warmer foliage right about there. Now I'm going to grab a little liner. I haven't used one of these yet, but let's take a liner. So we're going to put some tree trunks in front of architecture. And so I got my dark color mixed up. And we're going to start right in here with some trees. Let's say go right here. One, two. Whoops. Got another little color snuck in there that I didn't want to. Little light color. Sometimes I look at things and I'll say, like right in here, this will come in right off this house. There's a lot of little busyness right here. Bow, bow. Get a little bit more green into that color. It's just feeling a little warm to me. Here. Let's see, where else do I see? I see some over in here. I see some back in here. Just kind of going across the page. I see a nice dark right there. I see a little fence. If I could really sneak that fence in, it would really be nice. I can't sneak it in. I'd sneak it in later. How's that? Can't sneak it in now. In front of this, is there a little, yeah. It's a little tree. I'm going to do a little tree right here. Push that up and bring it down in there. Go over here. Yeah, boy, I see some other tree trunks right about here. these are in front of, behind, behind. Every now and then you get a little strong piece of light that's a line, and they're chimneys. So we can make a nice, and we'll kind of we'll just pop them in where I think they need to be. Here, every now, back here, see one up in here, over here. Okay, so what else we got? Let's go. So I want to get right back into the cliffs at the very end. There's a couple telephone poles. Normally I don't put them in, but because there's a community, I'm going to put them in. Let's get a mall stick if I can.
There's one right there.
I got it.
Oh.
We're just going to do this. Going to put one right here. Linear snaps. Your paint's got to be wet enough. I want to disappear a little bit. Then there's one back in the trees. Another one over here. Right about there. About there. And it's up about there. Whoops. Got one back there. Little post. Normally I don't put these in, but I don't in landscapes. But if I'm doing a community, then yes, because it makes sense to have literally a little fence back here. A couple lights on tree trunks. I don't like that light right there. Put the light right here. Don't like that shape. Or that's what's better. So what do you do when you don't like a shape? You go back to your base color. Fix it. So with that, fix it. And this actually fades away. So I'm going to actually darken it a little bit down here. I'll go back and I'll make it a blue at that point because it goes into shadow. Why not take it and bring it right into shadow? So it goes from light to shadow. And there's little spots of light. Look at these these are little fun things, man. If you have time, you can kind of go back and just find little areas and just have a ball with it. I'm not going to. Right now, I might after take a break, but for right now, we're just going to keep little touches like that going on. I'm going to go into the cliffs at the very end here. Okay, and I'm going to try with a knife to see if I can give a little bit more interesting characteristic to some of these rocks. So let's start up in here. Start there. So we push the lights on. Now, if that's a little too abrupt, then I'll just mess around with it, push it back. See, the paint is actually probably a little wetter than I want it right now. I just mixed some more dry paint into that, and I think I'm going to mix just a hint of blue into it also. Because there, I prefer it to be drier. It's a little on the wet side. So we're going to come in here, hit really strong right there. And right about there. And right here. A little bit up in here. As it creeps up, a little piece of light right in here. A little sneak. As I stand back and get a glimpse, I can see how the lights are beginning to work or not work for that matter. So I'm going to pronounce the lights where I see the lights strong. Right, I see them strong there. Let's push it. And a little bit, not as much, but little pieces of light kind of flickering back in here. Not anywhere near as much. It's too strong, so I just push it back with my finger. Okay, I'm going to go into this right in here. I'm going to add a little color, a little orange, a little raw sienna. Because I do like that color right there, and that's pretty much, we're going to bring a little bit of that up in here. Back in here. A little piece of it, a little bit more orange maybe. A little piece sneaking just down in here. This is where you can really have fun with color. You can really, ice plant is one of these great areas that you can just play and play and play. And you can be wrong. Don't be afraid to be wrong. That may be the best piece of advice I said throughout this whole demo. Don't be afraid to be wrong. In landscapes particularly, you guys, even more so in landscapes than almost any other form of painting, maybe with the exception of abstraction. Don't be afraid to be wrong. I don't want to go much over 5 minutes over, so I'm going to try and wrap this up in the next couple of minutes. Try and hold these things to an hour and a half. Sometimes we end up having to go a little long.
What size is that again? I forgot.
What?
What size did you work on?
This is 24 by 30. So it's pretty good. It's pretty good size. And you know, the size doesn't make it difficult. It's not really the size. It's the complexity of the image that you're painting. I just added a lot more orange and a little bit of Naples yellow, and I'm just kind of amplifying some of the reds. I'm starting to get too picky though for a foreground element. You don't want to get too picky in your foreground ever, because I'll tell you why. It becomes a stop. It stops the people from venturing back into the canvas, looking back into your canvas and seeing, because your focal point should never be up front. It should generally almost always be in the middle if you're dealing with what we would call a focal point. So a focal point basically is the cliff area in this painting. This paint stuff's pretty fun, man.
Can we quote you on that?
You can, yeah, I love doing this kind of stuff, and this is the kind of stuff that I could build on it for days. I could go back tomorrow after it's dry, add more textural qualities, more color variation, and just build, because that's really what, if you think about nature, ice plant, foliage, it's not one flat color. The only time you should ever see kind of anything that appears simple and flat is maybe way in the distance, where you don't see as much. But generally, you're going to see a lot more interest. And you can do it in your foreground, just don't overpick it. All right, don't overpick it. Let it be very, very indicative. It's as you move into your midground, where generally your focal point is, if you're dealing with what some people call a focal point. In this case, yes, it is a focal point, and that is the cliffs. The cliffs, the houses, whatever. The houses aren't as refined as I want. The cliffs are closer to what I want. They're not right on the money. They're still very much an impressionism kind of an approach to them. So, but in general, they're close. Not real crazy about the way this ends. Kind of comes over and fades away, literally. We'll hit some areas up here.
let it kind of fade as it comes down. It works its way down. Right in here, I think it's a little flat because it's in the midground. And so what I'll do is I'll maybe add a layer of more green to that, a little more strength to the green, right? It looks like right about, went a little too strong there. Let's try it again. Right about in here. That feels better. It needs to be a little bit more back here because this kind of sneaks out from the area between the two cliffs. Don't like that. It feels kind of like a rattlesnake. Fades up, fades over. Any in here? Yeah, a little bit in here too, huh? So I could amplify that green a little bit. I like to start in the mid. Think of this. Don't start with your brights, with the bright sunlight. Let the sunlight happen. Let it build upon your painting as opposed to start super bright. One last thing, and we'll call it quits. A little bit of paint on my palette knife. I picked up the warm white and the white. I had some red in here on my knife already, so I'm countering that with a little bit of the radiant blue. But I want it real light because I want this area right here to be much brighter. There, back up here, and it's works its way back into the distance right about in here, comes out in front of that. Oh, I like that little sneak of blue that happened. See if I can get more of that to just happen here. I like that little, it's an accidental thing, but it really added something. That light helped. This light that I just added, design-wise, helped a tremendous amount. Little radiant blue, little white. Where are we at? Okay, I gotta stop it. I held you too long. And I didn't mean to. It's just that there's so much cool stuff going on here that I could really start to have more and more fun. So as I stand back from this, it works pretty good. I'm not crazy about that. I think I could fix that a little bit. Kind of like some of the reds happening in here. I think there's a few little areas right in here where I could have brought the feeling of the cliffs down a little bit more and made it a little bit more effective. But for all intents and purposes, that's your painting. That's what I can get done in pretty much an hour. I like the fact that I pushed that back. I like that blue. I could manipulate a little bit more in here. But overall, that blue worked really well. Not happy right there. Kind of finger paint a little bit. This bothers me. It feels, I think I need a little bit of the foliage overlapping it, kind of like that kind of stuff. Okay.
I like that kind of stuff.
My hands aren't. So I'm actually relatively clean today compared to the way I usually paint.
Did you
a
look
little-
at your hands?
Huh?
Did you look at your hands?
That hand's pretty good. This hand's a little bit more messy.
Yikes.
Anyway, happy painting. That's what I can do in that amount of time, and it's kind of fun.
Yeah, a lot of paint on there, that's for sure.
There is a lot of paint on there.
All right.
Actually, it
Thanks,
looks better than I
everybody.
thought.
You guys have a beautiful day.
Okay, you too. Thanks, Tim.